During Wednesday's Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, Senator John Cornyn questioned officials about attempts to hold Putin and his supporters accountable for Russian war crimes in Ukraine. Cornyn pointed out that the United States lacks full authority to prosecute someone who has committed a war crime if they have not yet been found guilty or convicted. The senator raised concern about an influx of Russians appearing at the southern border, asking the officials if they are aware of any Russian war criminals that have made their way into the United States.
Senator Cornyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly join my colleagues in supporting the many bipartisan efforts that we're discussing today that shall hold Mr. Putin and his cronies accountable for war crimes in Ukraine. And I certainly support the effort to provide additional authorities to the Department of Justice in order to bring those war criminals to justice. One piece of legislation that I'd like to mention is the Ukraine Invasion War Crimes Deterrence and Accountability Act, which will direct the White House to collect and catalog evidence of war crimes past and present so that they can actually be prosecuted in a court. It passed the House in April and now is passed out of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and is available as an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, and we intend to offer that as an amendment. Mr. Rosenbaum, you noted that if someone guilty of a war crime is yet unproven and not convicted makes their way into the United States, that you lack the authorities to prosecute them. Is that correct?
That is correct, unless the perpetrator or a victim was a U.S. national or a U.S. service member.
And if we were to pass a law like the one that the chairman and the ranking member and others of us have support to provide additional authorities to the United States government under those circumstances, that would only apply to prospective cases, correct? Under the Constitution, you can't pass an ex post facto law.
Well, Senator, as almost always in law, it depends. But an argument can be made that for crimes that are universally condemned, like war crimes, for instance, that it does not offend the Constitution's ex post facto clause to enact a law that confers retroactive or retrospective jurisdiction.
Well, that certainly would be an argument that would be made and would have to be decided by the tribunal. But you said in your written statement and perhaps in your verbal statement, I didn't catch it, that it's highly likely that some perpetrators of war crimes have made their way into the United States, correct?
Yes, I wasn't speaking of Russian perpetrators from the current conflict, but rather war criminals from other conflicts, without doubt.
Of any origin. Are you aware that currently at the U.S.-Mexico border that Border Patrol is encountering people from as many as 150 different countries around the world?
I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, Senator, but that's certainly possible.
But you're aware it's from a variety of different countries.
Yes, sir.
Not just Mexico, not just Central and South America.
Yes, sir.
I want to ask Mr. Watson, are you aware that since January of 2021 that 45,000 Russians have presented themselves at our southern border, mainly at the San Diego sector?
Sir, I am aware of Russian nationals appearing at the southwest border, but that number, no, sir.
Well, according to one newspaper report, quoting a woman by the name of Irene Flores, who has spent the last 17 years selling magazines and newspapers at the San Ysidro port of entry, she said a huge influx of Russians in recent months, which, frankly, given what's happening in Russia and Ukraine now, isn't all that surprising. But she is quoted as saying, "Some cross while running. Others hide in the trunks of cars. I've seen some open doors and sneak into cars belonging to strangers. CBP officers try to stop them, but they jump out of their cars and make a run for it. Can the Department of Homeland Security say that with any sort of conviction or knowledge that Russian war criminals have not made their way into the United States, either through the asylum process or as one of these getaways or people who tried to avoid detection?
Sir, in my role and capacity as the Assistant Director for National Security, I can only speak to matters today that relate thereto. And to the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware of particulars to confirm that fact at this time.
Well, do you know whether when people show up at the border and claim asylum, whether they are vetted for things like war crimes?
Sir, I do know the work of the Human Rights Target Tracking Team, and I do know through open source research as well as database checks and collaboration with our IC partners that we do work to populate and provide reports to help inform DHS components in decision-making as it relates to conferring immigration benefits, as well as the Department of State in granting visa applications and approval thereto.
Well, as a matter of fact, the Biden administration and the Department of Homeland Security do not know whether Russians have appeared at our border, claimed asylum, but have committed as yet unprosecuted war crimes, which, according to Mr. Rosenbaum, the Department of Justice would have no jurisdiction of if they're here in the United States.